Okay, good morning, everyone. This is Stefan Underwood from Continuous Improvement. We're excited for our webinar this morning. Couple quick housekeeping notes. As always, if you've heard this before, if you've joined us, if this is your first time joining us, just to know that we are using Hannah McElwain's webinar account. She works in our marketing department. So her email address is listed. If you have a problem, please do not reach out to her, especially this month as she is on maternity leave. If you have any issues, you can reach out to continuousimprovement@teamexos.com. Other than that, we're going to mute ourselves here for just a few minutes, give it just a moment for some people who are finishing up coaching sessions to come in, and we will jump on here starting in about 3 minutes, introducing our panel and getting going with our Q&A. So just one moment.
Where did he go?
I don't know.
And they're back.
All right, good morning, everyone. So we'll start with a couple introductions and we will dive right in. So if you look on your screen right now, you've got sort of a little talking heads scenario of a few different webcams sharing from different places in the world. But by way of introduction, here with me is Jair Lee. Jair has been a longtime coach with the company, but has recently transitioned into full-time education role. So he's now traveling the world, just got back from China on Sunday, so we don't know what time zone he's in mentally, but he full-time educates for our company, teaching around the world about our system. His background, though, is he's having fun. He's the guy that says yes to everything, so he's done everything with work with Adi, our partnership, to working with pro soccer and going and spending time in Brazil for long durations with pro soccer or football, depending where in the world you're listening from, as well as running youth programs here. So he's sort of done it all. I'm Stefan Underwood. I oversee our continuous improvement efforts. You see on your screen, if you're looking at the same configuration I am, top left is Omi Iwasaki. Omi is our Vice President of Operations for the Works vertical. You probably know him, or at least know his name. Hopefully you know this, but if you don't, Omi's background, though, is not in operations. Omi's background is in physical therapy, and he has been with the company since the LA facility started and opened up in 2002? 2003. Wow. And I noticed a lot of the questions that came in beforehand really do lend themselves nicely to having a physical therapist or a physiotherapist on the line so that he can sort of take that more clinical approach to answering them. And then top right is Di Thomas. Di Thomas is one of our performance specialists who is based at our Google facility in London. So he works in the works environment. This webinar was actually his idea. So listening to feedback, he gave feedback after the Q&A session. Might be interesting for people to ask whatever questions they wanted. So we took his advice and asked him to be on the panel. Di has taken advantage of, he's known Exos for a long time, even before he started working for us. So he's completed all 3 phases of our mentorship program. He has experience in professional sport with Queen's Park Rangers before joining Exos in the corporate setting. But we're going to lean on him a lot for the real world application in the works and corporate environment, because that's what he's doing day in, day out. So he is joining us from London. So without any further ado, I'm going to kick it to Omi. Omi's going to sort of play a moderator role here. He's part of the panel. He's going to also answer some questions, but he's going to play moderator. He's got the questions that you guys wrote in beforehand, but I want to encourage you to make this as much a dialogue or bilateral conversation as possible. So Omi will be constantly monitoring the chat box. Please jump in the chat box, throw follow-up questions if you think of things. We have enough questions from beforehand to certainly get through this, but if you start throwing in more, we can hit rapid fire and get as many thoughts answered as possible. So let her rip, and with that, Omi, it's all yours.
Yeah, Jana is saying if you'd like a RD perspective, she can jump in as well.
Yes, that is perfect. Jana Mason is right outside my office door, so if anyone has any questions on nutrition, we have an RD that we can tap into very quickly. We can have her run in here on camera, and Jana Mason can answer that as well. So let it rip, whether it's about physical therapy, performance specialist questions, or nutrition. We've got some that can answer.
Let me check the question box, the live question box. Just one person saying they weren't seeing anything other than a white screen. And at this point, all you should see is a webcam, not any presentation at this point. So hopefully everyone can see that. Let's kind of go into the seated questions. We can start with, I currently work at a corporate site that is open to set in January. Directly outside the fitness center entrance, we have 2 rooms, one with a nap pod, another with a zero gravity chair. On the subsequent floors, they also have options to utilize a massage chair, nap pod, zero gravity chair. I understand that recovery is a vital piece of the puzzle, but I don't have any experience incorporating a nap pod, massage, or zero gravity chair. Do you have any suggestions on how to incorporate these options into a member's routine? Let's just stop there. I think there's maybe 2 questions that are fused here. So maybe stop here. Maybe we can start with Di, since these are fairly common things that you see at our Google accounts, and maybe you can give some kind of insight into some of that.
Yeah, sure. We're very similar. So we have some of these rest pods throughout the building, not directly outside the training facility itself. So we tend to guide people towards these rest periods, these rest pods, with our outreach programs. So each year, try to do it twice a year, we run a recovery and regeneration workshop. So we overview the importance of recovery as one of our pillars, how you can incorporate it into your daily, your weekly, your monthly routines. But we talk a lot about getting these naps, these power naps throughout the day. So trying to encourage people to spend 20 to 30 minutes of their day taking some time in a dark room, being able to get some rest, especially in a Google environment. And the building that we are in is very engineer-based, so they're spending 10, 12 hours of their day in front of the computer, in front of tech, whereas in their rest pod, they can switch off from that completely. We promote something called the 55-5 rule. So for every 55 minutes of time that you spent sat at the desk in front of your computer, get up, get away from it for 5 minutes. So if you're not able to get the full 20 to 30-minute nap, just to go and sit in one of these darkened spaces for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever you're able to afford, is going to have huge benefits. You can get some breathing done, some light meditation, so that when you get back to your space, you're much more rested, much more ready to go. So little chunks of recovery and regeneration throughout the day, and those facilities are there. So it's really good to have them to utilize and encourage people to utilize them, not always as part of a training program, but as part of their lifestyle as well.
Right. I think that's a great thing, talking about not only looking at your fitness members, but really looking at it as maybe even a non-member, non-mover population as well, of just getting them to incorporate some of these strategies into their lifestyle. Just even the act of getting out of your workstation and walking over there, even if it just for a few minutes, even if it's for a 30-second pause, whatever it is just the act of changing positions, which I think is very healthy. Maybe you can talk a little bit about even like a G pause, like, which is a different program, not that we're managing that, but just some of those aspects that you see at your account.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're lucky in terms of the facility runs, or the facility has at the back end of it a meditation room. So G-Pause is an internal Googler to Googler meditation community. So we don't run that ourselves, but we promote it through our group movement bookings, where people are able to come down, free sessions, get in that meditation room. Sometimes they're led by another Googler. Sometimes they are independent, and people will just get into that dark room, that quiet room, which is soundproof, and they can switch off. So if there's no pods, there's a room for us. So we have that space. We have a lot of other space as well. There's something called the Cube, which is a bunch of sofas, a bunch of small beds, where people can just go and lay down. There's no tech allowed in there at all, but just all these different options. And if you can't do that, we even encourage people, like Omi was saying, to get away from their desk. Just go for a walk, change your space, change your scenery, even if it's a little bathroom break. Just get away from what you're doing. So encourage this as much as possible.
Yeah, which is a great thing. I mean, again, you don't have to think of recovery as something that has to be physical in nature, that you have to change out and go into the gym and stretch or massage or foam roll or whatever the case is. I mean, these are all great strategies that you can just incorporate quickly into your life, and you don't have to change your clothes, just walk into these pods, or just sit down in a chair. And some of even the non-technology, I know there's some rules against a lot of the clients will try to put rules against no technology, but even if it's an area to break away to be productive, I think it's a very healthy thing. I know you want them to disconnect, but at the same time, people are finding that these type of stations are where they could be a little more productive, and sometimes they're designed for one person, but sometimes it's also a great place to get away to work with another team member, to just have some quiet space where there's no distractions, which, again, I don't think is a bad thing.
I also think,
oh, go ahead, Stefan.
I was just going to say, one of the key elements I think that Di said there is talking about some of the different ways to utilize these different options. Is to understand people are going to want to consume in different ways. So the more variety and options we can give them, the better. So I think most of your population, for example, the nap pods, look at that, and because of the name, they assume the only thing you can do in there is take a nap. Right. But to Di's point of teaching them a little bit about breathing tempos, balancing out autonomic nervous system, trying to decrease, sympathetic tone and restore parasympathetic levels. Just to say, get 10 minutes in there, it's almost just a sensory deprivation, if you will, but getting away. And I think that was one of the most valuable things there that he mentioned, is we need to show them different ways to consume, so that if napping for whatever reason doesn't fit them, they don't assume the nap pods are useless to them. They still believe that there can be a use for them.
Absolutely. Music. There's so many great apps, from either breathing apps or meditation apps, other things. I mean, there's so many free options as well that, binaural beats. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that people can just disconnect. I think you got to find what resonates for you and what works for you. Just on the same line, there was a question that just came in really regarding experience with any light therapy options in the workplace. And I can't necessarily think of anything purposeful purely from a light therapy standpoint. I know lighting and mood and sound and aroma therapy and those type of things are very big in some of these massage spaces or some of these relaxation spaces, but purely from a light therapy standpoint, I can't think of any. Do you have any there from a Google perspective, Di?
No, nothing on this facility, nothing I've been accustomed to.
Yeah.
One of the biggest things I'll recommend, and this comes from my time in the tactical space where they were actually trying to play with circadian rhythms. If they've got missions at night, they're trying to do things, it's just that understanding of blue wave light really telling us it's time to be awake, and understanding just cortisol spikes showing from all the tech that they're looking at, backlit screens nonstop, going up to fluorescent lights. Like you look at the environments that we're in all day, and it's not necessarily always the best to our overall sleep hygiene. Remembering sleep hygiene is not just at night, but it's a 24-hour cycle, right? So if we talk about different abilities, if they're starting to work later into the evening, starting to get into, there's different apps. I mean, the iPhone does it on its own now with night shift, but different apps and things that can sort of orange out your screen, remove blue wave light. It plays into Dai's comment of the 55-5 rule of utilizing, when you talk light therapy, and I know that is speaking to specific lights of different shades, but I actually just like to think of sunlight. So if there's an opportunity, depending where you live in the world and what the environment's like, that 55-5 rule, if you can get outside for 5 minutes, is even fantastic to the body. So I would just say being aware of the impact of all of the fluorescent and blue wave light that we're exposed to on a daily basis and ways to mitigate it, whether it is short breaks through the day, whether it is filters on your screens when you're getting later into the evening, if you're staying late at work, things of that nature, I think is some key takeaways.
Absolutely. Let's kind of move on here. I think this is a question from the same person, but really from a Group X studio standpoint, they have ballet bars typically in some of these Group X studios. Besides using them for obviously ballet type movements, helping with balance or anchor points or resistance bands, any other creative way to utilize these bars that are already existing in our spaces? I don't know if you want to take that from a standpoint of just creativity, you know, in a Group X studio. I mean, obviously our environments are all different, and you know, Jair, I know you travel quite a bit, so you know, looking at that, like some creative uses, thinking through kind of a anchored ballet bar in a Group X studio, if that's kind of what you have access to. Are there some creative ways to utilize that?
We were talking before, and Dai actually had some ideas, pulling in some FRC stuff, starting to talk about cars and how that. So this could turn into the Dai show very quickly. That's not a bad thing, so it's good information. But I would
it's a
say
cool accent, so let's all listen to Dai. Go ahead, Dai.
Yeah, I mean, we've got the one ballet bar attached to the mirrors, which fills the whole one side of the wall. We use it for the same thing as alluded to in the question. So balance, some members may not be able to stabilize during certain movements in a strength class, for example. So they can just have that external support there. We use it to anchor bands as well. We won't go into too much depth, but our guys got so strong that it started to come away from the wall. So I had to get refitted. So we tend not to use that so much anymore. But to Stefan's point about using CARs, controlled articular rotations, of certain joints from FRC, the Dr. Andrea Spina stuff, you can just get a hand on there. It's going to allow you to support your posture as you do some hip CARs. So you're standing in that vertical position. We can drive that hip flexion up nice and high and then open through a full rotation of the hip joint. So we tend to use it in those mobility type sessions. Sometimes you're not going to be able to get your leg fully up there to get a hamstring stretch, for example. So again, it's using it to support other movements more than trying to use it as a tool for everything.
Right. Support for just kind of creating tension, radiating tension, as well as for a postural support, reinforcement from a balance perspective. Again, we're about a movement-based kind of system. So if that helps us with clients to clean up their patterns, that's a great way to hold. And again, I understand the anchoring of, you don't want to use it as a heavy anchor point because it's not designed for that. So from that standpoint, you'd be better off using something else as an anchor point. But no, it makes sense. We can kind of move on if there's no other comments on this question. Good?
Good.
We'll go into kind of, here's a physical therapy question of really, given that Exos is one of the largest employers of physical therapists, do you see a model that will involve the use of evidence-based chiropractic in conjunction with PT and health coach trainers? What are the biggest, that's probably two questions. Let's just start with that question. And PT is obviously a different area from a business standpoint. I mean, I can start with that from that standpoint, but, you know, physical therapy, the acquisition of D1 Sports Medicine is fairly new. We're in very kind of early stages. I mean, if you even think of like from a MediFit integration, I mean, we're coming to the third year of that actual acquisition integration, and we're just scratching the surface from the standpoint of really trying to integrate methodologies into kind of both legacy companies from one to another. So I mean, I think the physical therapy thing is probably still a little bit new. Now, from an evidence-based chiropractic standpoint, this was purely a physical therapy business that was acquired. So physical chiropractic, with those some similarities, it's a different business model and it's a different kind of business. So I don't know really at this point of how that would be moving forward or interjected into our space. I know that some of our clients do have great relationships with on-site health clinics with either physios, PTs, or chiros that we're collaborating with. But from a exo standpoint, taking on that business, I think that's an area that I'm actually not sure if that's a direction we'll go. I don't know if you guys have any comments on that. But this is oh, go ahead.
We use only obviously here in the facility in Arizona.
Jair, speak up a little bit. Your voice is a little soft.
Oh, hey. I know here at the facility in Arizona, we use chiropractors, especially during combine season. That's when we see actually the chiropractors come into site to treat our athletes. The rest of the time, I know we refer out to our network that we have here in town, and several of the athletes use those services as needed or as recommended by our physical therapist staff.
Yeah, I mean, it's about an integrated approach. I mean, as long as the philosophies are shared and the communication path is there, I think any other discipline can integrate in pretty well. But if you're trying to use it in isolation, I think it's very difficult for us to be successful in an isolated approach.
I'd agree with that. Yeah.
So same question from the same person was really, I just kind of broke it up into two. What are some of the best seminar certifications that are game changers? So maybe you guys all can kind of speak to what have been game changers for you from an outside certification, outside education standpoint.
Yeah, I think anyone who's heard me talk as I go on, the live in-person workshops probably know my answer in advance. For me, it's SFMA. It's like functional movement assessment that is tied to the same group that created the functional movement screen. I guess one thing to say off the bat, they don't technically certify if you are not a clinician. So as a performance specialist, it's outside my scope to go run a screen on someone. So I'm not saying that I'm going to go conduct an SFMA assessment on a person. That would be outside my scope of practice. But having said that, one of my good friends, when he went to his SFMA, the question was posed by Greg Rose, who was running it, and said, should we teach our performance specialists the SFMA? And no one in the room put their hand up because the physiotherapy world felt that was their scope. And Greg Rose's comment was basically, you're all missing the boat. Because if those coaches we work with begin to have a better understanding of non-painful dysfunction and recognizing non-painful dysfunction, he said, I'm the busiest I've ever been after teaching the coaches at my clinic about SFMA, because obviously if someone is hurting, we send them to physical therapy. But there's a whole lot of things that cause no pain but are dysfunction. And that is within the scope of a performance specialist who's looking to utilize movement. But the second piece is, next to that SFMA is how we look at the human body. So understanding, and look, everything has different terminology, so we don't have all that, but in general, anything you go to agrees when you look at different dysfunctions, you have two different types of mobility dysfunction, one at the joint level that's more ligamentous or capsular based, and one that is tissue surrounding the joint, right? Whatever language you want to use to that, you've got those two elements that contribute to mobility. And then you've got stability or motor control, so your ability to control that range of motion. If you look at a lot of these things, it's, even though they are different, and there are differences, and a lot of these courses that are out there nowadays will tell you they're different, a lot of them stem to this idea of you need to own an adequate degree range of motion. And the key word there is own it. So you need to possess it and be able to control it and have strength and control at end range. And that's, to me, one of those underlying similarities. So for me, SFMA and what's called the 4x4 matrix, which I've talked about in a lot of places, and if you want to shoot me an email for more follow-up, or it's easily Googled, but when you look at our pillar prep model or our corrective model in primary and secondary blocks, when you start talking about how to progress and regress movements, for me as a coach, my biggest aha was learning that SFMA 4x4 matrix. So I would say that. And then I'll also say, and then probably throw this to either Jair or Omi, not sure if all three of you have done SFMA, or sorry, FRC, but I think at least a couple of you have. I want to next year potentially get to FRC because I think it has potential to be that. So knowing you guys may have more experience with that, I'll throw it to one of you guys and see what you think about that.
Omi wrote an amazing review on FRC since we actually took it together here at the facility. So Omi, I'll
well, go ahead. I mean, we could talk about FRC in a sec. I think that is something that, especially more recently, it's becoming more and more popular, and I think it is. I think it is a game changer. I mean, it's not anything new per se. I think it's just a different way of presenting the information. But, you know, Jair, kind of what other courses from your standpoint, what other certifications, what are things that have been game changers from your personal perspective? And we can come back to FRC in a sec.
I truly enjoy hearing Kelly Starrett talk. He was here in the facility this year during the summer, and one of the best things about Kelly is obviously how practical he tends to be, but right now he's bringing it back to breathing, connecting with the ground through, you know, working barefoot and having proper integration of the foot with the ground, and that, those two basics, I think they were so fascinating to see, you know, how something can be taken so far out into, you know, mobility and you know, smashing and soft tissue, but just going as far as like, hey, let's just go back to the fundamentals and let's make sure that breathing is in place, make sure that your feet are doing what they're supposed to do. That was a very pleasant surprise from Kelly, and very applicable to every single area, whether it's performance from athletes or, you know, at a Google site with DI, it doesn't matter. So that was a very, very cool experience from Kelly. And obviously FRC, as we were talking about it, that was another great course as well.
And I will, Omi, if I can, I'm going to throw in a plug really quickly, if I can. Or a few different plugs. I almost feel bad for saying SFMA first because this is not blowing smoke. This is not a company line. Honest to God, in my 15-year career, the most influential course I've been to is a Exos mentorship. Because what I will, and it's not trying to throw it a company line. That's why I'm passionate about this company. Is none of these things we're about to discuss: SFMA, FRC, Kelly Starrett, DNS, dynamic neuromuscular stabilization, like all these things we can throw out. To me, they're all wonderful, but what ties them together is a complete system. And so my career has been impacted most positively by the mentorship. So just to let you guys know, as you continue to engage with continuous improvement in 2018, I'm working to try and get discounts from certain groups. So we give you continuous improvement funds, but we also, I'm trying to help those funds go further. One of those discounts that I have, at least right now, limited to, that I'll be releasing in 2018. So because you took the time to join this webinar, you get the early teas. We're going to have some 50% off discount codes for Kelly Starrett's Movement and Mobility online course.
Maybe explain for those who don't know Kelly. Kelly Starrett, you know, physical therapist, strength coach, you know, runs the mobility WOD kind of, you know, maybe you can explain a little more, just if he's there, he might not be familiar to everyone on the call.
He's a physical therapist in California that probably gained most notoriety through his relationship actually with the CrossFit world, and he wrote the book Becoming a Supple Leopard. But again, from speaking with him, like it expands so much beyond just the quote-unquote CrossFit world. He's a fantastic physical therapist, has a really good view on things. Like I said, has written a couple books and created this idea of MWOD, or mobility WOD, of taking a daily approach to actually working on improving your mobility to free up movement efficiency. So a really good resource. In 2018, we're going to continue to allow people into mentorships around the world, and I've released that. You should have received them. If you haven't, please reach out to me. But we've got forms to fill in if you want to get to one of those Exos mentorships for free. We've got access to that. Just this point of all these things coming up, I'm running a course. I don't know if it's going to be a game changer or not, but there's an individual named Scott Livingston that has a lot of experience in this reconditioning world, this ability to link the physical therapy and the performance world. And he's another Canadian guy. He runs the courses up in Canada on a frequent basis and is sold out, and I've heard nothing but good things. So we are trialing, and it is his first course ever run in the US, and it will be being run in our facility here in Phoenix in March. And he's giving a discount to any Exos employee that wants to attend. So keep a lookout for that. So just to tease some of these things is, A, we'll try and get you access to some of these things or discounted access. B, you'll be able to learn about what courses are going on and what we're hosting. In January, I'm going to be launching a continuous improvement hub, so you'll have one site you can go to that has all these things listed. But C, before we continued any more about talking about things like DNS and FRC, no joke, our system is what ties it together for me. I feel like if I would have gone to any of those courses without the Exos background, I think I would have had a different takeaway, and they wouldn't have been as much the game changer. So I'll stop my plugs and the injection there, and we can jump back to maybe cut into FRC as the next one, because we've teased that. We haven't talked about it in depth.
Yeah, let's go into Di as well. Like Di, from your standpoint, your personal career, what has been game changers for you?
Yeah, I think alluding to Stefan's point just there, the mentorships were huge for me, because it does tie everything together. It gives you the house, and there's so much information, so many of these courses and qualifications, credentials that you can get in our industry, which we're very fortunate to have, and we live in an age where that information is so readily available. But how? Like, how do you join the dots and all that? It's all this interconnected web. And to be able to see through the mentorships, not only within Exos, like how it's applied in Phoenix with Jair and the coaches there, or myself and my colleagues working on different contracts globally, but just other people who are attending the mentorships as well, because they have their own backgrounds from other areas. They might be personal trainers, they might be physical therapists, but we've all done the same grounding. We've all done the same courses. People have done SFMA, FRC, so the knowledge is there with everyone. It's just how do we apply this? So the mentorships really do bring everything together and give you that ammunition to go ahead and apply what you've learned, not just in those 4-day mentorships, but in the workshops that you've done leading up to that as well. So it brings that web together to give you more ammunition to move forward.
Yeah, no, great, absolutely. I mean, from an Exos standpoint, I've been involved with Exos for quite a while, going on this 15th year here. Things from my standpoint, introduction to Gray very early on when I started with Exos from an SF or FMS, and then when SFMA was first kind of introduced in the market, luckily was able to attend one of their first courses and then help assist teaching one of their courses. So that's obviously been a great influence. I think more on the physical therapy side, but Shirley Sarman and her movement system impairment, philosophy, I mean, game changer from a standpoint. And when I was in the facilities, I had all the coaches actually study that. Again, purely from a standpoint it is more of a rehab and assessment based philosophy, but it teaches you how the body works. So I don't think that's a therapist thing, or it's not only a therapist thing. It makes our coaches much better to understand how the body works, how the systems work, and also to recognize good and poor movement, and some of the factors that kind of go into that. So I recommend that. It's a little bit of a dry read, and course-wise, it's only limited to therapists, but that was a significant game changer. And in the last few years, the FRC, the functional range conditioning, I've only taken that course. I haven't taken their other courses, but game changer, again, from a standpoint of really looking at, as simply put, of a way to expand your active range of motion to get as close to your passive range of motion as possible. I mean, as a simple philosophy. From an Exos standpoint and Exos systems, we've always talked about that, but this kind of is, I guess, a little more intention, a little more intensity, a little more purposeful towards some of the directionality of it, and really looking at it from a joint by joint kind of health approach versus more of a movement system approach. And but it integrates so well with our system. So their concepts have been great, and even in my own personal practice, personal journey of myself, my own human movement, it's been a great game changer from my standpoint, and I've seen great gains in the activities I like to participate in. So I know we spent a lot of time on this. Let's kind of try to see if we can't get into some other questions here. I think a big one that continues to come up, really multiple questions on the chat box here, as well as some seated things, is really looking at what are Exos mentorships, which I think you already talked about, Stefan. And if you haven't received that email, talk to your managers, talk to your direct manager, reach out to, if you're on the community side, RDs. If you're on the works employer side, check with your directors to see if you can't get this information. Other things are live. So, some people on the call here have attended some of the live regional events, which we kind of piloted this year. And are there plans to host more regional events in the next coming year?
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. So budgets are coming back in, and I'm excited that some things are looking positive. I'm looking to hopefully even have an international trip, so this isn't just limited, hopefully, to the United States. I believe I should be able to get to Europe or somewhere international to do a live workshop. We're probably going to aiming to do around 8 to 10 live workshops around the U.S. We'll pick areas that are densely populated by our staff. So you sort of, but I mean, this last year we tried to strategically look at a map and say, okay, we know that Northern California and the Bay Area has a lot of people. We know that New York, New Jersey has a lot of people. We know Texas has a lot of people. And those are the types of areas we hit first. We'll continue doing that, but I also try to get into some areas where we have fewer people so that you're not left out if you're not in one of those major areas. So for example, we got to Chicago and Detroit, where we didn't have as large a turnout, but again, some people from the Midwest could attend. So without doubt, 100%, that live workshop option will be continuing in 2018. And we've got the workshops, we've got 2-day workshops and 4-day mentorships by the Exos external education team that you can apply to come to for free. We've got our relationship with Perform Better that you can go to the Perform Betters at a greatly discounted rate. 1-day event is $50. The 3-day event, the summit, is only $99. So there's a lot of live in-person things, both Exos and third party, that we can try and get you into. If there's a course you want to get to that's hosted in one of our facilities, reach out to me. I can look into if we have free spots or how that works. But trying to just create as many different ways for people to consume from a continuous improvement standpoint as possible. But that will absolutely continue in 2018.
Great. Let's kind of move on here. Why do we perform miniband exercises and common compensations along with regressions or progressions we may see with athletes and clients? Oftentimes I find miniband work just something we as coaches always kind of do in movement prep regardless of the clientele. At times I feel like I'm jamming a square peg into a round hole with some of my groups. Furthermore, I become frustrated for answers when I find clients are not getting results we want. Are we going too light on minibands, too heavy, pelvic control? I mean, no other context here. That's kind of the question.
Yeah, I mean, I can jump on and start by saying, we want to clearly define what we want, right? So that comment of like people getting frustrated when they're not seeing the results they want, I guess I'd throw back at what are the results that you want? Because it isn't necessarily a massive adaptation. We aren't adding luteal size or something to that effect. It really is just activation of critical musculature, just trying to look at that pillar integration. So teaching postural awareness and postural control and lumbopelvic control and how the glutes then further down the, it's like up the chain, that lumbopelvic control, and down the chain, how they serve the knee, or the knee serves the hip, really. So I think that's the key, but remember, nowhere in our system does it say mini bands, it says glute activation. So that's the other piece that I like to speak to. I think we all agree it's critical musculature. There are certainly movements that I like more than others with the mini bands, but you can also get into bodyweight stuff, glute bridges, DNS star patterns, a lot of ground-based stuff. Just this idea of saying, are we activating critical musculature to start off a session? It doesn't have to be mini band based. It should just activate critical musculature. So I'll say start there, and then before I go on a long rant, and let someone else jump in with some thoughts.
Yeah, maybe one of you other guys can talk a little bit about, what do we see with miniband? And again, I think Stefan hit on it, is what is the intention we're trying to do with miniband? I think people think miniband is a glute strengthening or isolated glute only exercise, and people actually go too heavy for the most part. It's not a maximal effort. It is just an activation of the system. And sure, you do feel your glutes, but it is an activation of the system, and looking at how the pelvic control, trunk control, foot and femoral control those are all important aspects. Some people will actually feel their arch activating. Some people feel their glutes only. Some people feel some sort of maybe, core activation. But I think it's in the execution. It's how you do it. I think most people want it distally. They want to put it at their ankles because it's harder. They want to put 2 or 3 bands on because it's harder. And from my standpoint, I don't think people need a lot of heavy work. I like it at actually just right above the knee from a femoral control standpoint. The femoral control gives great feedback into the ground and the foot and ankle, but as well as all the way up into the hip, pelvis, trunk control. So it's purely an activation. It's how it's done. It's done really poorly and sloppily, I think, everywhere. Sloppily, I don't think is a word, but, shoulders moving all over the place, side bending, a lot of tick-tocking. I mean, it kind of defeats the purpose of why we're doing it. And if you feel you're doing it just to do it, then don't do it. Like you can find other ways, other mechanisms. So I think I'll kind of stop there and let you guys kind of comment.
No, I think what Omi said there is bang on. It's setting expectations from the start, especially in that environment where you're working with general population people. They see mini bands. They see these videos on social media of these fitness models using mini bands to do certain walk-based exercises, to use them as accessory in some lifts. And automatically there's this mindset of, if I use a mini band, I'm going to get strong glutes. And that's not what it's there for. So setting the expectations from day one. We say it even within our coaching. Using this mini band, you are not going to get stronger glutes. But what it's going to do is prime the muscle fibers so that within the session, now you're going to get stronger glutes. So it's allowing people to understand straight from the offset of the session, if you're using it in your movement prep, this is what it's for. Like, don't go crazy with it. You feel a little bit on the glutes, great. That's all we want.
Yeah, I think it's industry-wise, it's taken way too far, and I think sometimes even Exo standpoint, it's like, oh, you guys do that mini band stuff, or you guys only do that pre-habby stuff, or movement prep, or whatever stuff, which is hilarious to hear. But I just think it's traditionally in kind of this fitness world is more is better, so people want to go heavier and they want to do more of it, or they just want to isolate, and it's really such a small component. And again, the purpose is a glute activation, but again, that's not all we do. So it's just funny to hear. Jair, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, just to piggyback on Stefan, just to say that I think variability is also going to be key here. That it's not, the mini bands is not as stated on our pillar preparation or as part of movement preparation. So I personally like to vary within, one day I'll use mini bands, one day I'll use some type of glute bridges. Sometimes I'll use some sort of standing poses that is going to actually enhance the activation of the head musculature, then in a way to give that variety to the athlete and also to keep him away from boredom, if you may, but also, just not fall as a creature of habit that just because the mini bands are something that's almost like a staple in our culture, that it doesn't mean it's just the only way to do things.
Yeah, I think to answer the question on progressions and regressions, to me, it isn't about progressing or regressing in the form, or progressing anyways, in the form of trying to always make it harder. Because again, I think we probably alluded to what you're trying to achieve. But if we do have to regress, for example, or if you do want to progress, to me, it all comes down to tie things together. The last question, SFMA 4x4 matrix, or understanding, neurodevelopmental sequence, but just to start regressing down toward the ground, and that can lose the mini band. So to Jair's point, if we now go down to a half kneeling stance and I do a half kneeling lift, that's right there going to absolutely hit glute and pillar activation and lumbopelvic control and single limb stance and everything else that we want to work on. So I can do something there. From there, I can get down into a quadruped position. I can get down into lying. So all the way down to glute bridge, to me, is by position a regression from a standing mini band, like a weight-bearing exercise. So I'd say to utilize your position in space as the progression regression and not worry about the tension of the band being how you progress or regress, but more just posturally change position. And then the other piece is what I call lateralization. So not progressing or regressing, but staying the same level, but providing variety. And that's what Jair just spoke to, avoiding monotony. If every day is the same thing and people get annoyed with that, being able to switch it up just for the sake of variety, just know that we're activating critical musculature prior to movement.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, those are all great points. And from a regression standpoint or progression standpoint, I mean, regression is not a negative thing, right? So it's really a positional thing, and it's about movement efficiency, movement quality, movement proficiency of like what they can perform. So if you have to, quote unquote, regress a position in order for the, client, member, whoever to perform that movement for what it's intended for and actually complete it more proficiently, that's an actually, yes, you're regressing from a pattern standpoint maybe or a position standpoint, but it doesn't necessarily mean easy. And I think that's where people mentally go, well, I don't want to do something easy, just give me the harder one. Like, how do you make this harder? And again, I just think it's a cultural thing from an industry standpoint that we get sucked into that. We need to make it harder for whatever reason. So let me just try to jam through a few more. Contraindications or previous injuries that would make foam rolling an area contraindicated.
You had it when we were talking about this earlier. What did you write down in the sheet we're talking about?
I think it's just going through the basics, which is if this is an area where they suffer a trauma, like our athletes sometimes they come in, they got hit, this is an area that we're going to try to avoid. If there's significant swelling, this is an area that we're also going to try to avoid. We don't want to put more pressure in an area that's probably already injured, and we don't necessarily know what's exactly going on. I feel also any type of bone bruising, which falls into the trauma category, any recent fractures that we're not for sure they haven't completely healed, you might want to stay away from it. Any other side that is also painful, not sore, I think we need to be a little cautious on how much pressure we put into those areas. Also, I guess it's just a matter of communication and being able to ask the right questions and not to think that the foam rolling is the solution to every soft tissue problem that may arise with our clientele. We have to be sometimes careful, and going back to Kelly's story, I know smashing and attacking is great, but sometimes it can be pretty aggressive for some of our clients, so we need to be a little conscious of that.
Yeah.
And I think that's also another thing that gets taken way too far. Just mashing and mashing, and I know Kelly has a methodology, but that's not something that more is always better. So I think most people tend to want to create more pain on themselves or smash it or whatever the case is just aggressively for no reason. You have to understand why. You have to have a rationale why you're doing it. What are you trying to achieve? Versus just blindly just rolling or smashing your tissues for no apparent reason. And again, more is not always better in that scenario. And again, what are you trying to achieve? Bony landmarks, obviously, bone bruising, open sores. I mean, those are all fairly common. I mean, it just should be common sense of like not going over those areas. Do you want to be rolling directly on a bony prominence? Like you can. I mean, it's probably not going to feel good. Do you want to be foam rolling your IT band? Again, doesn't feel great. Probably not going to make much change to that type of purely at the IT band. Looking at more of the junction where the quad meets and also on the backside where the hamstring meet, great from that musculotendinous kind of junction area. But really, you're going to make changes to a fibrous band of tissue. You're just going to cause yourself more pain. If you want to affect the IT band for some reason, you got to ask yourself, why does it feel tight first? And really look at it from a logic change standpoint. That's where things like FMS, SFMA, some of just movement dysfunction kind of approach will help you understand why you might be feeling those things. And just blindly rolling, you may get some mild improvement or temporary improvement, maybe just when you stop. But what are you doing it for? So, Di, I don't know if you have any more to add on that.
I think that's a wonderful point to really make sure we probably say even a little bit louder, because our industry still has a high degree of that foam rolling the IT band. And so while that doesn't answer the original question per se, I think what Omi just said hopefully was maybe a light bulb moment for a few people. But starting to say, I mean, the IT band, first of all, it's my strut when I move. Like rigidity is okay, but looking more at that musculotendinous junction, looking at I'll add the TFL in as well. I mean, we'll go north as well, right? That intersection there, saying why does it feel tight? Looking at those interactions with muscle and trying to affect muscle tissue as opposed to just this tissue of the IT band. So I think that that's a really important part there that you just mentioned.
Yeah, and I think from a utilization standpoint as well, like Omi alluded to there, more is not always better, but with a general pop client, if you're working in the works environment, although more is not always better, some is better than none. And chances are a lot of the people that you see on a day-to-day basis, just like the people I see day-to-day, aren't doing enough of it. But they need to understand why they're doing it in the first place to ensure that they are doing enough of it. So we tend to keep it in terms of the prescribed corrective exercises that we give to our users, our pill prep, group sessions, but then on a regen day as well, on a regen session, we'll do a little bit of it. But we're not going to overdo it, but we still need to do it. People get into the mindset of, well, okay, yeah, I can overdo this, because that's a question we get asked a lot here is, can I foam roll too much? Well, yes, like to Omi's point, yes, you can, if you're doing it in the wrong way, if you're not taking the right prescription on it. But if you understand why you're doing it, and the purpose of what the foam rolling, what that soft tissue work is for, then you're going to have better control over that.
Yeah, I agree. When you say more is better, or more is not always better, I would say that's not referring to volume as much as intensity, right? And so I completely agree. And so we've alluded to a few times the understanding the why. So to call it out, increasing tissue extensibility through circulation, but then also predominantly looking to decrease tension. So if we're trying to decrease tension and there's a pain response and my face looks like this, like I'm like, oh, foam roller face, but it's so good. If I'm tense because it hurts, then we're not releasing tension. So to both Diane and Omi's point, if we call out the why, decreasing tension. Therefore, too much pain response increases tension. If you can't breathe through it, you're not doing it right.
Right.
And that's where the more is not always better is in terms of intensity, right? And then to Di's point, if you're doing it properly, understand why, and it is a massage, do that 7 days a week, in my opinion. You're fine.
Absolutely. Yeah, the pain face, the non-breathing, I mean, if that should be your sign. If you have to do that when you're rolling, it's too hard. It's not appropriate for what you need. So I just think, again, industry-wise, it just gets more is better. And we'll kind of segue. We only have about 8 minutes. I know you want to kind of talk about one more topic, really, just because I think this is a very popular one. It kind of goes into the more is better. It seems as though Tabatas and HIIT are the current trend in our industry. Certainly, there are benefits to this type of parameters. Oh, but they should be. Sorry, I can't read today. But they should be as prevalent as they currently are, or should they be as prevalent as they currently are? Oh my gosh, can't even talk. Where and when in the Exos methodology would it be appropriate to program a Tabata or HIIT sequence? How frequently should one be performing it within a mesocycle? And what are the pros and cons with this type of training stimuli? Kind of a big one, but since it is something that is very popular of just beat the shit out of people and smash people, again, nothing wrong with that type of protocol. It's just I think it also gets taken pretty far. So just kind of see what you guys think of there.
I'll start before anyone else dives in, just very quickly. I'll start by calling out we need to identify what is meant by Tabata, because it's become one of those things that Tabata is named after Dr. Tabata, and it's a set protocol that was researched of 4 minutes of steady state, and then one exercise modality for 8 rounds, 4 more minutes, 20 on, 10 off, then 4 more minutes after that. It's a 12-minute protocol. Now, not saying that also makes, but that has then turned into Tabata circuits where you've got 60 minutes of Tabata with 15 different things. 30. All these different, we're just going 20 on, 10 off for the whole class of like, there's overhead med ball slams and there's running on a treadmill. And so I think they're different things. So just to call that out of the actual researched protocol versus 2010. But at the end of the day, what we're talking about is interval training, which is an integral part of our ESD methodology. But another piece of our ESD methodology that is integral is the idea of progression, first and foremost. So not saying every time you interval train it should be at 20 on, 10 off, but rather saying what should those progressions look like? How do they change over time? And then another key piece of our ESD methodology is this idea of differing intensities and durations. And so you need to say, what are you trying to achieve between red zone, green zone, and yellow zone? Red zone being a high intensity, low duration. Tabata is absolutely high intensity, but it's very quickly going to force you into this glycolytic place, and it's probably going to not target the adaptation wanted in a red zone. It would give that rate of perceived exertion, but we may fall short versus like 10 on, 50 off, like a much more favorable recovery cycle or positive rest as opposed to a negative rest. Or we have green zone where we are looking more at this moderate intensity, moderate duration, and maybe it has a place somewhere between green and red zone, depending how you're applying it. But I'm just saying, know what you're looking for and try and see more differentiation. What I see in Tabata, other than just the traditional protocol looked at body composition, what I see with those Tabata classes is not quite enough rest for it to be a true peak power output red zone. So you fall short on red zone, although it's reported 10 out of 10 effort, like you sort of fall short on what we want red zone, but then a little too intense for a green zone when we talk about maintaining and holding threshold. So I see our green zones more in this like 2, 3, 4 minutes of work with 1 to 2 minutes of rest. And I see our red zones more as this like 10 on, 50 off, 15 on, 45 off, you know, things of that nature. So to me, it lands in the middle. So I'm not against it by any means, but I try to have more differentiation between red and green. But knowing we're short on time, that's all I'll add, and I'll let other people add things. And only if you cut us at 9:58, I'll just say to everyone, I'm going to make an exception at the end. If you're the first in the company.
We have 4 minutes to the top of the hour, so if you want to add, I mean, that's probably a good segue. You probably should kind of go into your announcement, and if you want to share your screen now, I just think 2 minutes is not going to be enough.
Okay, fair enough. Guys, in the chat box, I just put through a hyperlink. It is to a Google site. That Google site is going to go live tomorrow, so everyone in the company will have access to it tomorrow. But you guys are the first to see it for joining on here. But just want to let you know, we've been working through 2017 to say, listen, we understand culturally we need to have a unified language. We've always had our system and our methodology, but in years as of late, and those joining from MediFit, it can be really confusing because we've evolved and expanded, and it has made it confusing. So we've got our 8 training systems, or excuse me, our training system with our 8 training components. We've got our 4 pillars, but then we start adding performance quotient in journey, or we start adding behavior upgrade model. We start adding these different elements. We said we need to go back, find a unified language to be able to clearly speak to what it is we do and our view on human performance and provide resources. This is going to shape what continuous improvement looks like for all of 2018. I'm going to start speaking through this lens. I encourage you guys to as well. It gives us a shared language, but this is where I want to introduce you guys to Performance Code. And Performance Code is our view as a company on human performance. And it has come from a lot of work, pulling together hundreds of resources, talking with field staff. But this Google site, you've got the link now shared in the chat. You can look through it. Everyone else will get it in an email tomorrow. This is a website that has everything from just quick 5-minute introductions through to this bottom left Performance Code white paper is a 60-minute read, magazine style, 28 pages. That is probably the most in-depth. I encourage everyone to start working through these materials to dive in. It's inevitably going to create more questions. And so the main thing I want to say is it should create dialogue with continuous improvement. So I want you guys to feel free to reach out to me once you've read stuff, email me, call me, whatever it may be, and we can start talking through this and how it shapes things going forward. And also know that you will then get at the top of the new year, so when we all come back from a break, in January, you will get a webinar, a bonus webinar in January, where I will be going through a slide deck about Performance Code to dive in deeper and really take a bigger look at how this can be applied. So just exciting news to share with everyone on this webinar in advance of a company-wide announcement from Mark that's going to go up tomorrow. Other than that, we should probably wrap here. We got 1 minute. I definitely want to say thanks to everyone on the panel that took time to come in. I want to say thanks to Di for posting the idea. Everyone will get a request for feedback on this. We want to know if you liked the format, if you didn't like it, if you want us to do it again. We do read and listen to your ideas and try them out, hence why we're doing this right now. But other than that, I want everyone to practice what you preach, live the brand, and find some time in the next couple of weeks to try and relax, reload, refresh, and be ready for what, no matter where you work in our business, inevitably will be a very busy January. Anything anyone else want to add quickly?
Thank you. Happy holidays.
Thank you guys for taking on the idea, and thank you for everyone that submitted questions and came today.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, guys. Thank you. Happy holidays, and we'll see you with new webinars starting in 2018. Take care.